On this episode of China Uncensored, Apple going bad in China. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. You know, the great thing about when our heroes die is that after the fact, we can fantasize about what they would do in difficult situations without ever having to be disappointed by what they actually would have done. That's why I'm sure that if Steve Jobs were still around, Apple would never have dared to do what they just did in China. You see, the Chinese regime doesn't like Chinese people to have free access to the internet. Otherwise, they might find out about all kinds of complicated issues, like on the other side of the Taiwan Strait, there's another government also calling itself China. Or that it wasn't students firing on soldiers at Tiananmen. Fortunately, there's an app for that. OpenDoor, a free browser that lets people jump over the Great Firewall of China and view whatever they want on the internet. Apple's contribution to freedom in China has people jumping for joy. But not so fast, guys. Before you get too excited, Apple apparently made the decision to remove it from its Chinese App Store in July with no notice or explanation. OpenDoor developers realized something was wrong when their daily download rate from China, which averaged about 2,000 a day, suddenly dropped to none a day. OpenDoor is an application used by people living in repressive regimes around the world. But the difference between, say, Iran and China is that there's a lot more money to be made in China. And ever since a CCTV attack on Apple back in March criticizing the company for unfairly treating Chinese customers, that was pretty baseless, Apple's been pretty eager to bend over backwards and keep CCTV's boss, i.e. the Communist Party, happy. So obviously the best way to treat Chinese customers more fairly is by caving to pressure from an authoritarian regime and remove an app they, the regime not the customers, find inconvenient. Actually, this wasn't the first time Apple booted apps from its Chinese store. It barred an app that had all of Tibetan author Wang Lixiong's banned books. Apple also banned NTD's very own mobile app that allowed people to see in China our program. Thanks, guys. So after over a month of no explanations, the OpenDoor developers finally pushed Apple into giving them a reason why it was removed. It includes content that is illegal in China. Yes, they're saying a web browser has illegal content. I guess Apple, one of the world's biggest tech companies, is apparently a little unclear about what a browser is. Ironic since they have one of their own, but then again, no one uses it, so I can see why there would be some confusion. Let me just read out the definition of a browser for them. I'll just use one of my older handheld devices. It's called a book. A browser is a computer program that is used to find and look at information on the internet. A browser does not have content, so it cannot have illegal content. But Apple found a loophole. OpenDoor circumvents the firewall by sending internet pages to users through its own servers. This avoids using the user's ISP, which is usually what's used to block content. So technically, Apple can say that these servers contain content that would be deemed illegal by the Chinese government, and since all app developers have to comply with all legal requirements in any location where they are made available to users, Apple can technically claim that it had every right to remove OpenDoor from its China store. Good job, guys, must be proud. Proud enough to do it without notifying its developers while refusing to answer any questions media might have about it. So what is really happening here is just another example of corporate greed trumping corporate responsibility. Yahoo's guilty of the same thing. They gave up user information to the Chinese regime that actually landed political dissident Shi Tao in jail. He was only freed last month after spending more than 8 years in prison. For a while, Google self-censored search results to appease the Chinese regime as well, but when they found out playing by the regime's rules still didn't exempt them from cyber attacks from the regime, they pulled out of the Chinese search engine market. But hey, the lesson is if you want to make money off the Chinese people, you have to comply with their repressive government. There were a lot of international companies doing business with Nazi Germany at one point too. I guess whatever helps you sleep at night. As for OpenDoor, they've started working on an Android version. So what do you guys think? Where does corporate responsibility come in? And if you had a large business, would you potentially sacrifice your investors' interests by refusing to comply with laws you don't think are just? Leave your comments below. Check out China Uncensored's Facebook and Twitter page, and I'll see you again tomorrow with another new episode. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.